Welcome back, YouTube, to another episode here at WILDMAN Lifts. I'm your host, WILDMAN. Now on today's episode, I'm fortunate to get a little bit of sun, but it's still a little chilly outside. So this is perfect weather in order to see how I'm feeling today on the deadlift. Now the idea was to go light today and just work with the axle bar and the chains. But because I'm having nice weather right now, and because the last time I did my workout, it was super hot and draining, I kind of feel like my body is now adapted to really push it today. So I'm gonna go for a PR today on the axle with the chains. And hopefully I can map this out correctly because the math on the axle bar is different than the math on the barbell. So let's pop into today's workout. Let's see if I can get my math right. Now on today's strength giant set, like I said, I'm gonna be deadlifting with that axle bar. And I'm also gonna be using those chains as well. And I'm gonna explain in more detail why I'm using that particular implement on this particular day. And as I'm going up in weight, I'm also gonna be doing some bar facing burpees over that axle bar. This is just a great way to get some conditioning and to get some extra explosive work in there that will warm up my joints and my hips as I go up on the deadlift. And I'm gonna be flipping that stone over my shoulder real quick. And then I'm gonna be running a 200-meter run that I've personally measured. 100 meters there, 100 meters back. 100 meters plus 100 meters equals 200 meters. So I do know how to do math, which you'll see becomes my kryptonite as I'm going up in weight, but for a good reason. Now I'm doing the axle bar because it's thick in diameter, it doesn't bend, and the ends don't rotate, and there isn't any knurling on it. So as it gets heavier, I'm going to be using some straps. Now the axle bar is harder to get off the ground than it is with a traditional barbell, because typically on a barbell, because a barbell bends, with the more weight you add onto it, it gets a little bit easier to lift as it goes up. Reason being because as the bar bends, then you get an inch, 2 inch, sometimes even 3 inches more off the ground before the weights actually lift off the ground. So deadlifters know how to time that perfectly, where they're able to get it up into the maximum deficit and the bend of the bar, and then they're able to pull straight through. With an axle bar, good luck. It doesn't bend. And if it does bend, then you just broke your axle bar and it's gonna be bent forever. So for this reason, I'm training with the axle bar to really work off getting power from off the ground. I just watched a strongman competition recently where a really good deadlifter was having a hard time getting the axle bar off the ground. He was pulling and it looked like it wasn't gonna go. Once he finally got it off the ground, then he was able to deadlift it normal. And that just kind of shows that he doesn't train on an axle bar very much, because it really is hard to get off the ground and to generate that kind of power when the bar doesn't bend and is really thick. And I also threw those chains on there because I kind of wanted to see how much I could lift with those chains with the axle bar. The idea is as you pull from off the ground and those chains start to decompress off the ground, it's going to get a lot harder around the knee area. And then where the lift usually gets easier, once you pass your knee to lockout, the lift should get easier. That's the sticky point. But the idea is the chains keep getting heavier as you're pulling from the ground. And so once you get past the knee, it actually gets a lot heavier. So you have to continue to pull hard and pull fast, which trains your body in order to move through speed through the middle. And you can overload the barbell so you can feel what more weight you can lift at the top of the lift. And then you know what you need to train in order to get there and have it feel comfortable at the top of the lift, holding that maximum amount of weight. Now as I'm coming up to my top set, this is where my math gets a little foggy because the axle bar itself weighs 30 pounds, not 45 pounds like a traditional barbell. And so sometimes when I'm trying to calculate everything, it's a little hard. So I was actually adding 5 pounds more to the chains because I thought I was going to hit 500 pounds at the top if I did that. But it turned out that it was 460 pounds on the bottom, 50 pounds of chains, which makes it 510 pounds at the top. So I thought it was 500 pounds that I was lifting. So I was super excited because that was just the appropriate amount of effort to hit it. But then when I went through with my calculator and actually calculated it, I realized that I had 10 pounds more on the bar than what I was anticipating. But that's not a bad thing. In this case, my math failing me actually did me good because I would have never have attempted 510 pounds total. And that just goes to show that I have it in me, and I actually have a little bit more in me than I thought. So this turned out to be a fantastic day because of my bad math. Now I would have been really happy if this was 500 pounds total. Because I mismathed it and it was 510 pounds, that makes me even happier because it went up very smooth. Of course it was difficult, but it went up smooth and I felt like I could do even more weight. So I'm very happy with the way this went. Now let's continue on with the strongman workout and finish strong. Now for the variation giant set, I like to do PRs with the stones. meaning I've lifted a max amount of weight on the deadlift, and now every time I lift the stones after I'm done doing a PR on the deadlift means I just PR'd on the stones, because it's the most amount of weight I've lifted on the stones after I've done the deadlift. So in this case, I'm lifting in descending order within 3 rounds. So I'm starting with the lightest stone and then working my way up to the heaviest stone. And I'm doing it without a belt and without any equipment on, mainly just to feel that raw strength and to move when I really don't want to, because I've been doing all that work on the deadlift and my central nervous system is pretty taxed out. And as I was going up in weight on the stones, I was also doing some burpees, not bar facing burpees, just regular burpees, because I didn't want to walk all the way back to the bar. So I was just doing it close to the stones as I was going up in weight in between each stone. And then I was also running in between those 200 meters as well. Because by the time I was done with the strength and variation giant set, I did 1 mile running, a cumulative total, without having to run a mile consistently. Not bad for a guy who just likes to lift weights and really doesn't like to run that much. For the assistance giant set, I was only doing 2 rounds just to kind of make it a nice even number. And I was doing the axle bench row. This is a great exercise to do after you're done with the deadlift. Because that axle bar is so thick and I'm not using straps, I'm really taxing my grip now while still getting a good back workout in the same mechanics as a deadlift format. I continue to do those bar facing burpees over the bar. Now I was closer to the bar. I didn't have to walk so far, so I was like, I might as well continue to do bar facing burpees. But then I actually threw in that stone and did a 30-meter stone run to and from the bullpen, just to kind of finish off the stone lifting that I did and to get that extra loaded carry that I love to do for strongman. And for the accessory giant set, I was doing 3 rounds, and I was just finishing off those biceps that kind of got taxed from all the back work I was doing today. And I was going to do some axle curls, which I kind of find, because the axle bar is so thick, it does actually activate the bicep a little bit more than a barbell does. And I was doing hitchhikers because you know I love shoulder health and longevity. I don't want my shoulders getting pinched, so I love hitchhikers for that reason. And I was also doing some Nordic hamstring curls. Great exercise to do, especially after deadlift day. And because I was doing burpees, which involves somewhat of a push-up, I'm doing more push-ups even though they are assisted, because I'm actually focusing on my hamstrings. I'm hammering back really hard on those hamstrings and only using my hands and my chest as support. And this is a great way to end the exercise strong and to make sure that you're hitting all those muscles that you just fatigued. All right, so that's going to end it for today's workout. I really appreciate everybody stopping by, and I will see you next time. Thank you.